Hello, colleagues. My series on successful orthodontic treatment will continue with a case involving congenitally missing teeth, hypodontia of the two lower central incisors, followed for 2 years after treatment. It is very important not only how we finish orthodontic treatment, but also what happens after the retention period. Hypodontia is a very common problem in orthodontic practice, with third molars being the most frequently missing teeth, followed by the lower second premolars and upper lateral incisors. If we exclude the wisdom teeth, the prevalence of hypodontia in Bulgaria is 7.66%. In contemporary orthodontics, there is a tendency to close spaces created by missing teeth using the patient's own teeth. The reason is that in the long term, decades into the future, natural tooth roots are always preferable to any form of prosthetic replacement. We should definitely try to avoid prosthetic replacement in the anterior region, mainly for aesthetic reasons. Vertical growth of the alveolar bone continues for many years after the age of 20, and some authors believe that it may continue throughout life. If implants are placed in the anterior region, there is a risk that over the years they will appear more gingivally positioned than the adjacent teeth. This may necessitate replacement of the restorations with longer crowns. Another problem is that implant restorations can begin to show through beneath the gingiva, which often develops years later as a result of thinning of the vestibular cortical plate. Of course, the amount of tooth display in the smile is a factor that should play a leading role in the final decision regarding prosthetic treatment in the anterior region, as should any accompanying deformity. In this case of a skeletal class 2 relationship and hypodontia of two lower incisors, extractions of two upper premolars were necessary, and only one lower incisor was replaced prosthetically. The patient came to me in 2016 at the age of 17, after having passed the peak of skeletal growth. Extraorally, we can see a convex profile with a retruded mandible, but a pronounced chin. The face is symmetrical with reduced lower facial height, while the lips are excessively protrusive, producing a protrusive lip profile. The upper incisal point appears to be deviated to the left, partly because of the deviation of the nose to the right. Intraorally, there are quite significant orthodontic problems. The two lower central incisors are missing, and one lower deciduous tooth has persisted. There is a full premolar with distal occlusion and a 10 mm overjet. There is also a very deep traumatic bite, with the incisal edges of the lower incisors contacting the palatal gingiva. The radiographs confirm the main problem, a genesis of the lower central incisors. Fortunately, the wisdom teeth are present. On the cephalometric radiograph, we record a tendency toward a skeletal class 2 relationship, with an MB angle of 3.6 degrees and a width appraisal of 3 mm, in a strongly hypodivergent growth pattern. The upper and lower incisors are proclined by more than 10 degrees from normal. Consequently, the lower incisors contact behind the cervical areas of the upper incisors. There is also concavity at the base of the second, third, and fourth cervical vertebrae and elongation of their bodies, indicating that we are at the final stage of skeletal development, and that the growth spurt has already passed, with this severe distal and deep bite and reduced facial height. Tooth extraction would normally be contraindicated. But how can we establish proper incisor contact and normalize their inclination? Another dilemma is how to improve the markedly protrusive profile, despite the prominent bony chin. After analyzing the problems, I extracted the two upper premolars and decided to mesialize tooth 32 toward the adjacent incisor, in order to place only one implant in the lower anterior region. The reason for moving the incisor is based on the concept and research of Professor Zakrisson, an extraordinary orthodontist from Oslo. When teeth are moved, the roots generate bone both in thickness and in height. There are numerous studies on this subject demonstrating this phenomenon, which can reduce the need for additional surgical procedures when placing implants. You can see the initial horizontal and vertical bone atrophy, and how movement of the root creates sufficient bone thickness and height for implant placement. And so, treatment begins with extraction of the upper first premolars. It is necessary using maximum anchorage to distalize the canines by a full premolar width. The upper right posterior teeth are more strongly mesialized, and the upper incisal point is slightly to the left. I will probably not be able to correct this completely. I bond brackets segmentally only to the lateral teeth and place a 0.016 fuin, 0.022 inch thermoactive arch wire directly into a 0.022 inch slot. Because of the large interbracket distance, this is possible. I do not bond the incisors at the beginning because maximum anchorage is required for distalization of the canines, and I want to avoid unnecessarily proclining them further. After 6 months, the segmental distalization is nearing completion. You can see minimal anchorage loading with 3 posterior teeth opposing the canine, which is now in a class I relationship. You can see how, despite the anti-inclination bend incorporated behind the canine tips with the root lagging behind the crown because destalizing force passes below the center of resistance of the canine. Notice how leveling the curve of SPI at the upper second molars also begins to improve the deep bite, something we aim to achieve during orthodontic treatment by leveling the second molars. The next step is to bond brackets to the incisors as well, in order to retract them. This is the situation 1 month later, when there is no longer any space behind the canines in the upper dental arch. I place figure 8 ligatures to stabilize the canines in this position, and a 0.016 inch thermoactive arch wire to upright the canines and retract the anterior segment. I also bond the lower incisors so that I can begin mesializing them. 5 months later, retraction of the upper incisors has progressed using stainless steel arch wires and power chains. I place the lower brackets to correct the pronounced curve of SPI in the lower dental arch and thereby improve the deep bite, which is the goal of the orthodontic treatment. After another 6 months, there is already a risk of debonding the lower brackets because of incisor contact with the biturbos placed on the upper central incisors. We immediately extrude the posterior teeth to the new occlusal height. Extrusion of the posterior teeth using box elastics is indicated in a hypodivergent growth pattern. After another 2 months, 1 year and 10 months after the beginning of treatment, the patient has well-aligned dental arches, incisor contact following extraction of the upper premolars, and mesialized lower posterior teeth under the action of class II elastics. A small space remains in the lower dental arch. Now is the time to evaluate the root axis on the panoramic radiograph and determine the site for prosthetic replacement of the incisor. The question arises, should the tooth be replaced prosthetically, or can I close the space by further mesializing the lower posterior teeth? This is orthodontically possible, but it would compromise the good sagittal occlusion. We would end up with a mesial occlusion, with the cusps of the upper and lower teeth opposing one another. This is undesirable from the standpoint of long-term stability, when tooth position is maintained by optimal occlusion. It would also prevent normal function. Thus, I reached the decision that prosthetic replacement of a single 6 mm lower incisor was necessary in order to achieve optimal occlusion in the posterior segment. Considering the bone atrophy, I decided to mesialize the lower left incisor in order to generate bone thickness and height by moving the root of tooth 32 mesially through the alveolar ridge and uprighting its root so that an implant could be placed between teeth 32 and 33. The lower third molars would also need to be extracted. 5 months later, with an open nitty spring, movement of the incisor is nearing completion. Sufficient bone thickness has been generated, and a little more separation of the roots is needed to create adequate space for the implant. You can see that the upper incisal point coincides with the middle of the clinical crown of the lower incisor, while there is an excellent occlusion in the posterior segment. After another 2 months, the roots of 32 and 33 have been further separated using arch wire bends, and the stop bend has been placed to maintain the passive space with slight overcorrection. You can see the difference in the thickness of the alveolar bone following movement of the incisor. The next step is CBCT imaging and implant placement by Dr. Krasimy Nedevsky. I would like to thank Dr. Krasimy Nedevsky for his collaboration in this interdisciplinary case and for his description of the work he performed, of which I understand almost nothing. Please forgive me if I get anything wrong due to my lack of expertise in this area. The choice of a Prama implant from Sweden and Martina for this patient was not accidental. The design of this implant allows the formation of a greater volume of soft tissue in the supracrestal zone. Prama has the characteristics of a transmucosal implant, positioning the implant abutment connection well above the compact bone. This is intended to promote long-term preservation of the bone level. Considering the patient's young age and modern concepts regarding the continued development of the facial bones over a prolonged period, after skeletal maturation, an implant was selected that would allow subsequent changes in soft tissue levels without requiring replacement of the abutment or manipulation of the crestal module. The implant is 10 mm long and 3.8 mm wide. At placement, a roll flap was performed to increase the volume of the vestibular soft tissues. For achieving stable and long-term aesthetic soft tissues, a thin abutment and an appropriate emergence profile of the crown are of great importance. The prosthetic restoration was fabricated according to the principles of biologically oriented preparation technique, BOP. The implant was placed on the 15th of January 2020. The temporary crown was placed on May 27, 2020, and the permanent crown on the 10th of June 2021. You may notice a difference in the gingival level on the right, which could be corrected at a later stage. Here, the patient is 1 month after implant placement. The soft tissues are healthy and calm, with no signs of inflammation. The passive arch wire maintains the space until placement of the temporary crown. I removed the braces 6 months after implant placement, just to be on the safe side, or after 3.5 years of treatment in total. This was quite a long orthodontic treatment. Excellent occlusion was achieved in the posterior segments with a class I canine relationship and a therapeutic class 2 molar relationship. Following extraction of the upper premolars, there is incisor contact with an almost normal interincisal angle, and the deep bite has been corrected. I placed upper and lower fixed retainers and an Essex in the upper arch to prevent reopening of the extraction spaces. This is 1.5 years after treatment. The occlusion is stable and the papillae around the crown have adapted beautifully. The control radiograph 2 years after implant placement assesses the achieved overcorrection of the root movement of the lower left incisor. It can be seen that the position of the lower wisdom teeth has deteriorated. They are lying against and impacted into the second molars, necessitating their extraction. On the control cephalometric radiograph, the patient is now a hypodivergent class with a normal inclination of the upper incisors. Superimposition of the initial cephalometric radiograph, shown in black, with the retention radiograph, shown in red, demonstrates a major change in the inclination of the upper incisors. There has been slight forward movement of the mandible in the sagittal direction. This has resulted in a reduction of the MB angle and improvement of the profile and the submental fold. For long-term stability of the corrected deep bite, it is very important to have an appropriate interincisal angle and proper incisor contact in order to prevent further eruption of the incisors and recurrence of the deep bite. The interincisal angle has changed from 118 degrees to the normal value of 133 degrees, beginning, end, and 1.5 years later. In the comparison on this slide, we can clearly see correction of the distal occlusion at the canines, normalization of the inclination of the incisors, and correction of the deep bite. We can also see the adaptation of the papillae around the implant crown. The profile clearly shows retraction of the lips to a normal position and normalization of the fold between the chin and lower lip. Despite the extraction in the upper jaw, the nasolabial angle is normal. My message to you with this video is that whenever possible, it is best for our young patients with hypodontia to avoid prosthetic treatment, especially in the visible anterior region. If prosthetic treatment is unavoidable, we should at least try to reduce the number of implants. The second very important point is that at the end of treatment, we should have good occlusion in all three dimensions of space. Thank you for your attention and see you again in the next episodes of this series, presenting the magic of orthodontics.